Hello everyone. In the previous part, we explored the entirety of the Dance of the Dragons, the bloodiest civil war for the Iron Throne in the history of Westeros, a conflict that ended with nearly all of House Targaryen's dragons dead. But what became of House Targaryen after the Civil War? Could they continue to maintain their power in Westeros without dragons? Today, I will continue bringing you the historical tales of a song of ice and fire. In this episode, we will turn to the Second Dornish War and the eventual integration of Dorne into the Seven Kingdoms. 1. The reign of King Aegon III. After the Civil War. As mentioned previously, after reclaiming the Iron Throne from Rhaenyra, King Aegon II held it for only half a year. He died in mid-131 AC, and his successor was his nephew, Prince Aegon, the son of Princess Rhaenyra, who was only 11 years old at the time. The first waves of unrest were swiftly quelled by Lord Cregan Stark. However, Stark soon returned to the north instead of remaining in King's Landing. With his departure, the position of regent became the object of fierce rivalry among the great lords. In total, 7 men vied for the regency, plunging the royal court into bitter internal conflict. This period lasted from 131 AC to 136 AC, when Aegon finally came of age to rule in his own right. For those 5 years, all power rested with the small council of 7. Of them, only Grand Maester Munkin served continuously until Aegon reached his majority. The other positions changed repeatedly. The most capable among them was the Sea Snake, Lord Corlys Velaryon, but he died in 132 AC at the age of 79, mourned by many. The remaining seats also changed hands frequently for various reasons. The first small council of King Aegon III. Lady Jane Arryn died of illness in Gulltown 134 AC. Lord Corlys Velaryon died of old age 132 AC. Lord Roland Westerling died in 133 AC during a long and brutal winter. Lord Manfred Mooten died of old age and sickness 133 AC. Sir Torrhen Manderly resigned in 132 AC after his father and brother died in the harsh winter. Grand Maester Munkin, the only one to serve Aegon III until 136 AC. Their replacements. Lord Unwin Peake replaced Lord Velaryon in 132 AC, resigned 2 years later. Lord Thaddeus Rowan replaced Lord Westerling in 134 AC, removed in 136 AC. Sir Corwin Corbray, husband of Rhaena Targaryen, replaced Lord Mooten in 134 AC, but was killed the same year. William Stackspear, chosen at the Great Council of 136 AC. Mark Merryweather, also chosen at the Great Council. Laurent Grandison, also chosen at the Great Council. The regency years began under Sir Tywin Lannister, who served admirably as Hand of the King despite being blinded and deafened. Injuries inflicted during Rhaenyra's tortures. How he managed to rule in such a state remains a mystery. Sadly, the harsh winter claimed Tywin's life in 133 AC. Matters worsened when Lord Unwin Peake became regent. Having played a crucial role in both battles of Tumbleton, Peake believed it an insult if he were denied the regency. He eventually secured the position and amassed even greater power. He filled the Red Keep with his relatives and attempted to marry his daughter to King Aegon III after Princess Jaehaera, Aegon's betrothed, committed suicide at the age of 10, much like her mother, Queen Helena, who had leapt from a window in Maegor's Holdfast. Questions soon arose surrounding Jaehaera's death. Did she truly kill herself? Whispers spread that she may have been murdered, and many names were mentioned. Among them was Sir Mervyn Flowers of the Kingsguard, the bastard brother of Lord Peake, who was on duty when the girl fell. The truth remains unknown, but Lord Peake was certainly implicated. He also worked tirelessly to undermine his rivals for the regency. Lord Alan Velaryon, brother of Sir Adam Velaryon, proved to be Peake's most dangerous rival. Though initially offered his grandfather's seat after Corlys's death, Alan refused and instead sailed to war in the Stepstones. There he earned the name Oakenfist after a great naval victory. Yet his fame caused division when he returned to King's Landing. The Hand had earlier planned to secure the Stepstones and end the pirate kingdoms, but Oakenfist accomplished this swiftly on his own. Thanks to his victories, Alan was appointed regent despite Lord Peake's constant obstruction. Peake eventually persuaded the other regents to send Alan to the Westerlands to deal with the longships of Dalton Greyjoy, the Red Kraken, one of the fiercest warriors of the Iron Islands. Peake expected Alan to be defeated or killed, but events unfolded quite differently. Alan won a resounding victory and secured the Westerlands. Throughout all this, Aegon III, still too young to rule, remained little more than a pawn. His childhood was bleak and joyless. He dressed only in black, wandered alone, and rarely spoke. His only companion in those early years was Gaiman Palehair, the boy who once falsely claimed to be King Viserys' son during the riots in King's Landing. Gaiman later served as Aegon's page and friend, but eventually died while tasting food for the king and his young queen, Daenerys Velaryon. Lady Daenerys was a relative of Lord Alan Velaryon. Her father, Daeron Velaryon, had died in the Stepstones. She was only 6 years old when Princesses Rhaena and Baela brought her before the king during a Grand Maiden's Ball in 133 AC, where thousands of girls were presented. The event was organized by Lord Peake, who still hoped to marry his daughter to the king despite the regent's opposition. His scheme failed. Furious, Peake threatened to resign and leave the regents to rule alone. The small council wasted no time replacing him with Lord Thaddeus Rowan. Aegon's sole joy in those years came with the return of his younger brother, Prince Viserys, captured at the Battle of the Gullet and taken as a hostage to Lys, presumed dead by all. Aegon had long been haunted by guilt for abandoning Viserys when he fled on Stormcloud. It was Oakenfist, Lord Alan Velaryon, who finally rescued Viserys from the Lysene traders at great personal cost. Viserys returned with his betrothed, Lady Lara Rogare, and from that point on, Viserys became the only person Aegon truly trusted. Through Lara Rogare and her family's immense wealth, the regent's power was finally broken. Yet the Rogares overreached, seeking to control the Iron Throne itself. At their peak, the Rogare Bank rivaled even the Iron Bank of Braavos. Their actions drew suspicion. Lord Rowan was accused of collusion and tortured for information. Sir Marston Rivers, newly appointed Hand, arrested Lara after capturing her brothers. Still, the king and Viserys refused to abandon her. All were besieged in Maegor's holdfast for 18 days. The conspiracy unraveled when Sir Marston attempted to carry out the king's orders by arresting only those Rogares and Rowan supporters directly involved. Sir Marston himself was slain by Kingsguard Sir Mervyn Flowers. Chaos piled upon chaos. After Lord Rowan's arrest, Aegon named Grand Maester Munkin as the new Hand. When Aegon finally came of age, he entered the small council chamber with his hand and formally dissolved the regency, appointing Lord Manderley as Hand of the King. Order was restored and the realm finally knew peace. Yet Aegon III's reign also marked the decline of Targaryen power. The king bore deep emotional scars from his childhood, withdrawn, joyless, and often locked away. He disliked being touched, even by his beautiful wife. Only after much time did he allow her into his chambers once she was capable of bearing children. Their marriage produced 2 sons and 3 daughters. The elder son, Daeron, was named Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne. Though Aegon brought peace and prosperity after the Civil War, he felt little affection for either his people or the lords. He was a cold king, especially upon the Iron Throne. Viserys, more gifted in persuasion, grew increasingly stern after his wife abandoned him and their children to return to Lys. Together, the brothers governed daily. Among their challenges were impostors claiming to be Prince Daeron the Daring, believed dead at the Second Battle of Tumbleton, though his body was never found. Another great concern was restoring the dragons. Though Aegon feared and hated them, Viserys convinced him that dragons inspired fear in all who would oppose House Targaryen. At Viserys' urging, 9 sorcerers from Essos were summoned to hatch dragon eggs, but all attempts failed. When Aegon's reign began, 4 dragons remained alive: Silverwing, Morning, Sheepstealer, and Cannibal. Yet 3 were lost or lived wild. The last dragon hatched and died during Aegon's reign, earning him the epithet Aegon the Dragonbane. After ruling for 26 years, Aegon III died of consumption in 157 AC. Many remarked that he looked far older than his years, perhaps the cost of a childhood cut short. This sorrowful king is little remembered, though he rebuilt what the previous generation had destroyed. His legacy would soon be overshadowed by the reigns of his sons. 2. The accession of Daeron I and the Second Dornish Conquest. When Aegon III died, his eldest son Daeron was only 14 years old. Perhaps because of his natural charisma and prodigious talent from a young age, or perhaps shaped by his memories of his father's regency, Daeron refused to accept any regent ruling in his stead. Instead, he chose to rule personally with the help of his uncle Viserys as Hand of the King. When the young king was seen wearing the very crown of Aegon the Conqueror, many believed he would one day achieve glory equal to that legendary ancestor. Yet that glory would soon turn to ashes. Daeron possessed a brilliant mind and a remarkable gift for persuasion. When he first attended meetings of the small council alongside his uncle, he presented his plan to complete the conquest by finally uniting Dorne with the Seven Kingdoms. Many lords reminded Daeron that even Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters had failed to conquer Dorne, and that now, the Targaryens' greatest weapon, the dragons, were gone. In response, Daeron spoke the words that would become famous. "You have a dragon. That dragon stands before you." From that moment on, he became known as Daeron the Young Dragon. Daeron I devoted all of his strength to the war against Dorne, a land where, centuries earlier, countless soldiers from the Reach and Stormlands, and even Targaryen dragons, had perished. He divided his forces into 3 separate armies. The first, commanded by Lord Tyrell, would march into Dorne through the Prince's Pass. The second was a royal fleet led by Lord Alan Valerian, which would attack by sea. The third, led by the king himself, would advance through the Boneway, using hidden paths to bypass the Dornish watchtowers. Together, these 3 armies numbered between 50 and 60,000 men, outnumbering the total forces of Dorne. The young king swept aside all opposition in his path. Victory was also secured in the Prince's Pass, and most importantly, the royal fleet smashed Planky Town, across from Lemonwood, allowing it to sail upriver along the Greenblood. Dorne was effectively split in 2 once Lord Alan gained control of the Greenblood, preventing the western and eastern Dornish forces from aiding one another. From there, battles erupted across the land. Within a single year, the invaders reached the gates of Sunspear and fought the Dornish in the shadow of the city itself. In 158 AC, the Prince of Dorne and 40 of the most powerful Dornish lords knelt before Daeron I at Sunspear. Thus, the young dragon accomplished what even Aegon the Conqueror had not. Though rebellions still flared in the deserts and mountains, many rebels becoming outlaws, they were few in number. The young king swiftly moved to consolidate his rule in Dorne, suppressing every rebellion he could find, though the task was far from easy. On one occasion, Daeron nearly fell to a poisoned arrow, saved only when a Kingsguard shielded him. Prince Aemon Targaryen, second son of Viserys Targaryen, known as the Dragon Knight. Aemon Targaryen would become one of the greatest knights in the history of the Seven Kingdoms, revered and beloved by many. By the end of 159 AC, Dorne appeared largely pacified. The young dragon returned to King's Landing in triumph, leaving Lord Tyrell behind to govern the region. To further ensure Dornish loyalty, Daeron took 14 noble hostages back to the capital, mostly sons and daughters of Dorne's great houses. However, the moment Daeron returned to King's Landing, it became clear that while the hostages and their families seemed loyal, the Dornish people were not. 10,000 men had already died during the conquest, and over the next 3 years, that number rose to 40,000. Dornish resistance grew fiercer by the day. Lord Tyrell attempted to crush the uprisings, riding from castle to castle with each passing moon. Supporters of the rebels were hanged, villages accused of sheltering insurgents were burned, and the cycle continued endlessly. Yet the Dornish fought on, stealing supplies, burning camps, killing horses and laying traps. Soldiers were slain in Sunspear, ambushed among the dunes, and murdered in their own encampments. The true turning point came at Sandstone, the seat of House Corgyle. When Lord Tyrell arrived, the castle stood empty. Entering Lord Corgyle's chamber, Tyrell lay down upon the Lord's bed. There, he noticed a long cord meant to summon servants. When he pulled it, a panel above the bed opened, and 100 red scorpions poured down, killing him. The death of Lord Tyrell ignited full-scale rebellion throughout Dorne. By 160 AC, King Daeron was forced to return to Dorne to suppress the uprisings. He won several minor engagements, advancing through the Boneway, while Lord Alan Valerian once again appeared at Plankytown and along the Greenblood. After another defeat in 161 AC, the Dornish agreed to swear fealty once more and proposed negotiations with the young king. In truth, it was a trap, an act of betrayal, and a carefully prepared assassination. The young dragon and his forces entered under a banner of peace. Suddenly, they were attacked. Prince Aemon shouted, "Protect the king!" The Kingsguard drew their swords to defend Daeron, but the Dornish overwhelmed them. 3 Kingsguard were slain while trying to carve a path of escape. A 4th surrendered. Prince Aemon continued to fight to save the king, but he was struck by 2 arrows and captured. Daeron the young dragon was surrounded and finally slain, still clutching the sword Blackfire in his hands. Thus, the Second Dornish conquest ended once more in blood and death. Daeron Targaryen was killed, at least 50,000 invading soldiers perished, and Dorne remained independent. Daeron's reign lasted only 4 short years, and his vast ambition died with him. His glory might have been eternal, but instead it proved fleeting. After many famous victories, a single catastrophic defeat was enough to render the entire war meaningless. 3. The reigns of Baelor and Viserys, and the restoration of peace with Dorne. When news of Daeron I's death reached the people of King's Landing, along with word that the surviving armies were scattering in chaos across Dorne, many in the capital erupted in fury and demanded the execution of every Dornish hostage. Even the hand of the king, Viserys, normally known for his calm and measured temperament, could not contain his anger upon hearing of his nephew's death. He immediately ordered all the hostages imprisoned to be held until they could be hanged. Viserys' eldest son Aegon was so enraged that he even handed over the Dornish girl he loved to his father so she could be put to death. But there was an even more urgent question. Who would succeed Daeron? Daeron had taken the throne very young, and he had left no children, no heir. By law, the crown therefore passed to his brother, Baelor. Baelor would prove to be the most devout king of the Targaryen dynasty, perhaps the most devout monarch in the entire history of Westeros. His very first act upon taking the throne was to order mercy for all the Dornish hostages. Countless acts of piety and forgiveness would follow throughout Baelor's 10-year reign. Even when lords and the small council begged him to avenge his brother, Baelor declared that he would forgive those who had slain the young dragon. He vowed instead to bind up the wounds of the war Daeron had begun and to restore peace with Dorne. Then the young king announced something that stunned the realm. He would go to Dorne with no army at his back and no sword at his side. He would personally return the hostages and offer peace. And he did exactly that, walking barefoot from King's Landing to Sunspear, dressed only in mourning black, while the hostages rode behind him on horseback. Many songs were later sung of Baelor's journey into Dorne, spread across the realm by minstrels and singers. While crossing the Stone Way, Baelor came to the castle of House Will, where Prince Aemon, the Dragon Knight, was being held captive. He found Aemon imprisoned in a cage, naked. Baelor pleaded with the Lord of Will to show mercy and release him, but the Lord refused and ordered the king to continue his journey. Baelor then prayed for his cousin and promised he would return. Generations later, many wondered what Aemon must have thought in that moment, when the man standing before him, swearing to come back and save him, was a frail, hollow-eyed king who could barely speak, barefoot and bleeding. Baelor continued on and survived the deadly Boneway, where thousands before him had perished. Alone, he crossed Dornish deserts on bare feet, between the low hills at the mountain's northern edge and the Scourge to the south. He endured the murderous heat of Dorne, with the hostages riding behind him. It was a brutal, punishing journey, but in the end, he reached Sunspear alive and met the Prince of Dorne. Some believe that was the first miracle of Baelor's reign. The second miracle was that he succeeded in maintaining peace with Dorne for the rest of his rule. Among the terms agreed between the two sides, Baelor accepted a betrothal. Young Prince Daeron, grandson of the Hand Viserys and son of Viserys' eldest son Aegon, would one day marry Princess Maria Martell, the eldest daughter of the Prince of Dorne. Both were still children at the time, so the marriage would take place when they came of age. After several days in Sunspear, the Prince of Dorne offered to send Baelor home by ship. But the young king insisted the Seven had commanded him to return on foot. Some Dornish courtiers feared that Viserys might use Baelor's death on the road as a pretext for war, so they did everything they could to ensure the king's safety. Many Dornish lords invited him into their castles to rest. When Baelor reached the Boneway, he remembered Aemon still held captive. He asked the Prince of Dorne to free him. The Lord of Wile agreed, but instead of releasing Aemon himself, he handed Baelor the key to Aemon's cage. Aemon was still naked, burned by the sun by day and chilled by desert winds at night. Worse still, a pit had been dug beneath the cage, filled with hundreds of venomous snakes. The Dragon Knight fell to his knees and begged the king to leave him, to seek help from other Dornish lords nearby. But Baelor only smiled and told Aemon that the gods would protect him. Then Baelor climbed down into the pit. The singers would later claim that the snakes bowed their heads as Baelor passed. The truth was harsher. Baelor was bitten dozens of times as he moved toward the cage. He managed to unlock the door, but he nearly collapsed, and only Aemon's grip pulled him back from falling. Now both men were trapped inside the cage. The guards of House Will began placing bets on how Aemon would get them out. Perhaps their cruelty drove Aemon to reckless defiance. He lifted Baelor onto his back, climbed to the top of the cage, and leapt out of the pit. After leaving House Will's castle, Aemon carried Baelor through the remaining stretch of the Boneway until they reached a village. Mountain priests gave Aemon clothing, and he continued carrying the king, who had fallen into a deep coma. When Aemon reached the towers of House Targaryen, he and the king were brought to Blackhaven. There, maesters did what they could before sending word to Storm's End for aid. Baelor was terribly weak, close to death. He slowly regained consciousness on the road to Storm's End, murmuring prayers without cease. More than half a year passed before he returned to King's Landing. During that entire time, Hand Viserys ruled the realm, struggling to preserve the fragile peace Baelor had forged with Dorne. The realm rejoiced when Baelor entered the Great Hall and took his seat upon the Iron Throne. He continued his worship of the Seven, and his first decrees sought to reshape laws to better reflect the faith. Although Baelor had been betrothed to his sister, Princess Daena, in 160 AC, he sought to persuade the High Septon to annul the marriage. The betrothal had been made before he became king, and it would never be consummated. After the marriage was set aside, Baelor confined Daena and her sisters, Rhaena and Elaena, in the Red Keep's Tower of Beauty, later known as the Maiden Vault. The king claimed he wished to shield them from temptation and mortal lust, though some believed he feared being tempted by their beauty himself. Despite the objections of Viserys, the princesses, and other members of the royal family, Baelor carried out his decision, placing the three sisters, along with maidens sent by various lords, within the tower. Opposition continued as Baelor issued more and more decrees. No one expected them to cause such trouble for the young king. Thousands of prostitutes and their children were gathered and driven from the city. Baelor also resolved to build a new sept upon Visenya's hill, something he claimed to have seen in a dream. In time, it would be known as the Great Sept of Baelor, though it was only completed long after his death. That sept was merely the first of many visions Baelor claimed to see in his dreams. Some began to believe that his brush with death in Dorne had damaged his mind. In later years, his decisions grew stranger still. The common people loved him. Baelor poured royal treasure into charity. including daily distributions of bread to the poor. But many lords across the Seven Kingdoms became increasingly uneasy. After annulling his marriage to Dana, Baelor sought to ensure he would never wed anyone at all, taking vows like a septon before the High Septon. His decrees became ever more religious. He even urged the citadel to use doves instead of ravens to carry messages, and proposed tax exemptions for families with virtuous daughters, symbolized by the wearing of a chastity belt. One of the most dangerous impulses of Baelor's reign was his insistence on burning books. Some texts contained dangerous lore, yes, but destroying knowledge was intolerable. Few mourned the burning of the Testimony of Mushroom, filled as it was with vulgarity and scandal. But Septon Barth's Unnatural History was another matter entirely, a work by one of the sharpest minds the Seven Kingdoms ever produced. Barth studied higher mysteries, enough for Baelor to despise and destroy his work. Even though Unnatural History contained neither blasphemy nor the sins Baelor claimed to fear. Only fragments of it survive to this day. As the years passed, Baelor devoted more and more time to fasting and prayer. When the High Septon died, Baelor told the most devout that the gods had revealed the next High Septon to him. They obeyed and selected a commoner named Pate, an honest man who carved bricks beautifully without training, yet could barely remember a prayer. That High Septon died a year later of illness. Baelor then insisted the gods had chosen an 8-year-old boy as the next High Septon. Baelor claimed he had seen the child speak with doves and that the birds answered in the voices of men and women, the voices of the seven, as Baelor described. Once again, after the king's declaration, the most devout complied, and the youngest High Septon in history was installed. The birth of Daemon Waters, later known as Daemon Blackfyre, to Daeron Targaryen by an unknown father, though later all would know the father was the king's cousin, Prince Aegon, who would become Aegon IV, coincided with Baelor's increasingly severe fasting in penance. Many began to whisper that the child was Baelor's. Baelor's prolonged fasting nearly killed him. Then came another tragedy, the death of the newborn twins of Princess Nerys, Baelor's cousin and the wife of Prince Aegon. This grief drove Baelor to refuse all food, taking only water and a few bites of bread. He endured 40 days that way. On the 41st day, Baelor collapsed before the altar of the mother. Grand Maester Munkin and the boy High Septon did everything they could to save him, but this time, the king's miracle did not come. After 10 years of rule, King Baelor died in 171 AC. With Baelor's death, the Iron Throne once again needed an heir. Daeron and Baelor, both sons of Aegon III, were dead, leaving only daughters. Some argued that Princess Dana should take the crown, but the memory of a woman upon the Iron Throne 40 years earlier still haunted the realm. So, by the precedent established by the Great Council of 101 AC, the crown passed to Aegon III's younger brother, Viserys, the Hand of the King, who had served 3 kings and had in practice ruled much of the realm during the reigns of Daeron and Baelor. After Viserys took the throne, ugly rumors spread. Some claimed he had poisoned Baelor after waiting a decade to sit the Iron Throne. Others argued Viserys had poisoned Baelor for the good of the realm, as Baelor began trusting the faith more than his own people. Because if the king continued issuing decrees favoring the faith, conflict might eventually erupt between the Iron Throne and the North, which followed the old gods, and the Iron Islands, which worshipped the drowned god. Still, no one could deny this. Viserys had effectively governed for 14 years, while Daeron waged war, and Baelor spent more time in Seps than in the Red Keep. Viserys himself had been held hostage in Lys for many years and returned with a beautiful Lysene bride, tall and graceful, with golden hair and violet eyes typical of Valyrian blood, which still lingered in Lys. She was 7 years older than Viserys. Though she was not truly happy in Westeros, she bore him 3 children before returning to Lys. Their firstborn was Aegon, born in the Red Keep in 135 AC, strong, charming, and profoundly irresponsible, moody and devoted to pleasure. He caused his father endless trouble, and in time, the realm would suffer under his rule. A year later came Viserys' second child, Aemon. Aemon was as healthy and handsome as his brother, yet utterly different in character. He proved himself a gifted knight in the lists, worthy to bear the Targaryens' Valyrian steel blade, Dark Sister. In later years, he became famous as the Dragon Knight, often wearing a helm crowned with 3 dragon heads of pale gold. Even today, many call him the finest knight who ever lived, and one of the greatest names to serve in the King's Guard. Viserys' last child was born in 138 AC, his only daughter, Princess Nerys. Pale-skinned and slight of frame, with delicate features, she inspired many songs, especially about her beautiful purple eyes. Of her 2 brothers, Nerys loved Aemon most because he could always make her laugh, because he possessed something Aegon never did. She loved the 7 and might have become a septa had Viserys allowed it. But instead, Viserys forced her to marry Aegon in 153 AC. Singers claimed both Aemon and Nerys wept at that wedding, though some histories say Aemon and Aegon argued loudly during the feast. Many later writers claimed the reckless actions of the young dragon and Baelor had been shaped by Viserys's counsel, while others insisted he did everything in his power to correct their mistakes. Though Viserys's reign lasted less than a year, he enacted reforms, reorganizing the royal forces and how they operated, founding a new royal mint, and encouraging trade across the narrow sea. He also revised parts of the legal code dating back to King Jaehaerys. Viserys II came to be called a new Jaehaerys, for no king had been wiser or more capable at governance. But disaster struck the 7 kingdoms when illness claimed this gifted king in 172 AC. There was something unsettling about the suddenness of the sickness, and at the time no one dared put their suspicions into words. More than 10 years later, someone finally wrote an accusation that King Viserys II had been poisoned by his own son and heir, Aegon. Was it true? We cannot know. But after the shameful and rotten reign of Aegon the Unworthy, many came to believe it was. 4. The miserable reign of King Aegon IV. With his father's death in 172 AC, Aegon at last took the Iron Throne he had long desired. In his youth, Aegon had been courteous, skilled with lance and sword, fond of hunting and dancing. He was considered one of the cleverest princes in the Red Keep of his day, admired for his tricks and sharp wit. But Aegon possessed one fatal weakness. He could not control himself. Lust and appetite, his hunger for pleasure and indulgence, turned him into someone else entirely. Once seated upon the Iron Throne, Aegon's wretched reign began with actions he had dreamed of for years, and as time passed, his desires grew without limit. The deeds of this new king would haunt the realm long after him. As Maester Caith wrote, Aenys was too weak and Maegor too cruel, and Aegon II was greedy. Yet no king before or after ever ruled so ill as Aegon IV. Aegon chose those who governed not for noble blood, honesty, or wisdom, but for their ability to amuse him or flatter him. Women flooded the Red Keep, living there for one purpose only, to satisfy the king's lust. In sudden whims, Aegon would seize lands from one house and grant them to another, such as renaming the great hill known as the Teats of House Bracken, only to gift it to House Blackwood instead. The Brackens and Blackwoods were ancient enemies for thousands of years, much like the Starks and the Boltons. For his personal pleasures, Aegon squandered the royal treasury. He even presented his hand, Lord Butterwell, with a dragon egg in exchange for 3 Butterwell daughters. And when he needed someone's wealth, Aegon did not hesitate to strip rightful heirs of their inheritance. To the small folk, his reign was a source of crude tales and cheap entertainment. To lords who did not live in the Red Keep, it was a time of anxious hope that the king might someday release their daughters. Aegon was physically strong, decisive, impulsive, and, most of the time, did not slaughter people in great numbers. But anyone who blocked his desires could discover a man capable of cruelty and extremely dangerous. Many said Aegon never slept alone. Every night, a woman had to share his bed. His lust spared no one, noble maidens and whores alike, and he seemed to care little for the station of whoever lay beneath him. In his later years, Aegon claimed he had slept with at least 900 women. Yet he truly cherished only 9, and even among those 9 was not Nerys, his sister and queen. Each of these 9 lovers bore him children, but one by one, save the last, they were sent away the moment Aegon grew bored. He even lay with Princess Daena, sister to the young dragon Daeron, and to Baelor, and fathered a son by her. Daena named the boy Daemon, after a brilliant and fearsome prince of earlier days, Daemon Targaryen, brother of Viserys I and husband of Princess Rhaenyra. The boy grew into his name. Daemon Waters was his full name, born in 170 AC. When Daemon was born, Princess Daena refused to name the father, yet many suspected Aegon's hand in it. Raised within the Red Keep, the handsome young prince was taught by the realm's finest maesters and trained by some of the greatest knights of the 7 kingdoms, among them Sir Quentyn Ball, a gifted but hot-tempered knight known as Fireball. Daemon cared for little besides constant training. Over time, he surpassed others of his age. Many believed that one day he might become another dragon knight. At the age of 12, Daemon was knighted by King Aegon himself after winning a tourney for the squires. This made him the youngest knight ever raised, 4 years younger than the previous record holder, King Maegor, who had been knighted at 16. But that was not all. Aegon stunned the Red Keep and the small council alike when he bestowed upon Daemon the legendary Valyrian sword of Aegon the Conqueror, Blackfire, the sword of the Iron Throne itself. Aegon then granted Daemon lands and wealth. Daemon abandoned the bastard surname Waters and took a new name for himself, Blackfire. Now, as for Aegon's lawful wife, Queen Nerys, she was the only woman Aegon did not truly enjoy bedding. Nerys was gentle, fragile, and devout, everything the king was not. For Nerys, childbirth was a struggle for life itself. She was small and sickly. When she gave birth to Prince Daeron in late 153 AC, Grand Maester Alfred warned she would die if she bore another child. Nerys pleaded with her brother, "I have done my duty and given you an heir. I beg you, let us return to living as brother and sister." Aegon answered, "That is what we are doing." Yet Aegon continued to demand his sister fulfill her duties as wife for the rest of her life. Their troubles deepened further because Prince Aemon, Aegon's brother, had been inseparable from Nerys since youth. This kept Aegon and Aemon in constant tension. Still, Aemon served as the perfect Kingsguard. He died defending King Aegon from an assassination attempt by the Toyne brothers. The whole realm mourned Aemon's death. He was nearly a legend, the very image of a true knight. But none grieved more than Queen Nerys. She died a year later in childbirth. After that, Aegon did little to honor either of his siblings. The king's quarrels with his own family grew worse once Prince Daeron matured enough to speak his mind. In Lives of Four Kings, Caith wrote that the false accusation of adultery against Sir Morgil Hastwyck, accused of bedding the queen, was in truth the king's own scheme, though Aegon denied it at the time. The king's accusation led to Sir Morgil's death when he chose trial by combat against the Dragon Knight. Singers loved this tale, Aemon defending his sister's honor. Around the same time, Aegon and Prince Daeron fought bitterly when Aegon wanted to wage war on Dorne. It was the first time, though far from the last, that Aegon threatened to name one of his bastards as heir instead of Daeron. In the later years of Aegon's reign, Prince Daeron increasingly proved himself a far better ruler than his father. Some lords saw opportunity and sought to bribe the gluttonous king for more lands and titles in exchange for satisfying his appetites. Others began to rally around Prince Daeron, despite the king's threats and the spreading rumor that Daeron was not truly Aegon's son at all, but the child of Nerys and Aemon. Yet Aegon never formally cast Daeron aside. Some claimed that perhaps some fragment of honor still lived within him, or that he felt shame for what he had done to himself and his wife. More likely, Aegon understood that if he disinherited Daeron, Daeron's allies would be ready to go to war to defend his claim, Dorne among them, since Daeron had married the sister of the Prince of Dorne. That may also explain why Aegon began to focus on Dorne, exploiting hatred between the Dornish and the Reach and Stormlands to buy allies away from Daeron and use them against the prince's supporters. Fortunately, Aegon's plan to invade Dorne in 174 AC collapsed when a storm destroyed the Targaryen fleet on its way south. It was only one of Aegon IV's many foolish acts. Still unwilling to abandon the dream of conquest, the king later commanded the pyromancers of the Alchemists' Guild to make him a dragon. They produced a grotesque wooden and iron monstrosity fitted with wildfire sprayers, perhaps useful for siegecraft. But Aegon wanted to drag this device through the Boneway, steep, narrow passes where the Dornish had carved steps into the rock. The contraption did not travel far. One of the first dragons caught fire violently in the Kingswood, still far from the Boneway. Then the other 7 dragons burned one after another. Hundreds were burned, along with a quarter of the Kingswood. Aegon was forced to abandon his ambition of conquering Dorne. At last, Aegon IV's foul era ended in 184 AC, when he was 49. By then, he was so massively fat he could barely walk, and some wondered how his last mistress, Serene of Lys, mother of Shiera Seastar, could bear his embrace. Aegon's death was horrific. His body bloated and sagged until he could no longer rise from his chair. His limbs slowly rotted as maggots crawled through his flesh. Many maesters claimed they had never seen anything like it. Septon said it was the gods' punishment. To ease his pain, the maesters fed him milk of the poppy, though even a small amount might have been enough to ensure he never woke again. But even before dying, Aegon committed one final act of catastrophic folly, one that would drag the realm into one of its longest and bloodiest cycles of rebellion. He legitimized all of his bastards, whether born of lowly women or noble ladies. To Aegon, it may have been a comfort, perhaps even a twisted apology for what he had done to the women who had shared his bed. But for the realm, it meant blood and fire for 5 generations. The 9 lovers Aegon claimed to love most, and their children. Lady Felina Stokeworth, 10 years older than the king, Aegon's first lover. Their child is unknown. Megette, wife of a blacksmith. In 155 AC, while riding near Fairmarket, Aegon stopped to have a horse shod and met Megette. He bought her for 7 golden dragons. Aegon intended a secret marriage, but his father Viserys discovered it and sent Megette to the faith as a septa. Their children were Alysanne, Lily, Willow, and Rosie. Lady Cassella Vaith, a Dornish hostage brought back by the young dragon. Cassella and Aegon had no children. Belligear Otherys, a thief, merchant, occasional pirate, and captain of the Widow Wind, born to a Braavosi merchant's daughter and a Summer Islander envoy. After Nerys nearly died from a miscarriage in 161 AC, King Baelor sent Aegon on a diplomatic mission to the Summer Islands, perhaps to keep him away while Nerys recovered. In Braavos, Aegon met Belligear. They carried on an affair for more than 10 years, though she had husbands in every port she visited. She bore Aegon 3 children over that decade, 2 daughters and the son: Bellinora, Narha, and Balerion. Lady Barba Bracken, daughter of Lord Bracken. After Aegon took the throne, he made Lord Bracken his hand and took Barba as his mistress. She bore him a bastard son, and 2 weeks later, Nerys gave birth to twins, 1 boy and 1 girl. The boy died, the girl lived and was named Daenerys. Barba's bastard son by Aegon became famous, Aegor Rivers, called Bittersteel, who later founded the Golden Company. Lady Melissa Blackwood, the king's favorite mistress. Younger and more beautiful than Barba, and far gentler, Melissa was kind and generous, friend to Queen Nerys, and even beloved by the Dragon Knight and Prince Daeron. She bore Aegon 3 bastards, the most famous being Brynden Rivers, called Bloodraven. Her children were Mia, Gwenys, and Brynden. Lady Bethany Bracken, Barba's sister. Aegon brought her to the Red Keep in 177 AC, but she became involved with a Kingsguard knight, Sir Terence Toyne. Aegon caught them in bed in 178 AC. Sir Terence was tortured to death. Bethany and her father were executed. This led the Toyne brothers to attempt revenge by assassinating the king, an attempt in which the Dragon Knight gave his life protecting Aegon. Bethany and Aegon had no children. Lady Jane Lothstone, daughter of Felina, Aegon's first lover. She was brought to the Red Keep in 178 AC, only 14 years old, after her father was named the New Hand. Jane and Aegon had no children. Serenay of Lys, a beautiful Lysine girl brought by Lord John Hightower. Serenay was the most beautiful of Aegon's lovers, though rumors claimed she also practiced sorcery. She died giving birth to Aegon's last bastard, a daughter named Shiera Seastar, who later became one of the most beautiful women in the Seven Kingdoms, loved by her half-brothers Bittersteel and Bloodraven, and a key spark in their lasting hatred. 5. Daeron the Good ascends the throne, and Dorne joins the Seven Kingdoms. After Aegon IV died in 184 AC, his eldest son and heir, Prince Daeron, swiftly returned from Dragonstone and was crowned before the High Septon. He wore his father's crown, an intentional choice meant to prove that he truly was Aegon's son, as rumors still lingered that Daeron had been fathered by Aemon. Daeron immediately set about correcting the damage his father had done, beginning with the complete dismissal of Aegon's small council. He replaced them with men he chose personally, most of them known for wise and sober counsel. Around the same time, Daeron also reformed the City Watch, but he did not stop there. The new king worked tirelessly to repair everything his father had left behind. He was deeply devoted to the duty of ruling the realm, and he also tried to keep his father's bastards under control. Though he could not, and never would, revoke Aegon's final decree, he still did everything he could to bring his half-siblings closer together, treating them well and granting them what Aegon had promised. He paid the dowry that Aegon had pledged to the Archon of Tyrosh, and as a result Daemon Blackfyre was required to marry Rohan of Tyrosh, as Aegon had intended. At the time, Sir Daemon was only 14. At their wedding, King Daeron granted Daemon lands near the Blackwater Rush, with the right to build a castle of his own. Some said Daeron did this to establish clear rights and boundaries between himself and Aegon's highborn bastards. Others claimed the king was simply too kind and too fair. But whatever the truth, Daeron's efforts would bear no fruit. At this point, the Seven Kingdoms had not yet suffered the consequences of Aegon IV's disastrous final will. The marriage between Daeron and Princess Mariah Martell began to show its true power, and it would become one of King Daeron's greatest achievements, something no previous Targaryen king had accomplished. For 2 years, King Daeron negotiated with his good brother, Prince Meryn Martell of Dorne, over the terms under which Dorne might join the Seven Kingdoms. In the end, Prince Meryn agreed, on the condition that he would marry Daeron's sister, Princess Daenerys. The wedding was held the following year, and through that marriage, Dorne finally bent the knee and swore fealty to the Iron Throne. Daeron helped the Prince of Dorne to his feet, and the two walked together from the Red Keep to the Great Sept. There they laid a wreath at the feet of Baelor's statue, and Daeron said, "Baelor, what you always wished for has been accomplished." It was a magnificent moment. At last, the entire realm, from the Wall to the Summer Sea, stood united, as Aegon the Conqueror had once dreamed. And more wondrous still, it was achieved without the cost of lives, unlike the price the young dragon had paid in blood. The next year, Daeron ordered the construction of a new palace in the Dornish Marches, where Dorne met the Reach and the Stormlands. It was named Summerhall to mark the peace he had forged. It was not quite a castle, but it was strong enough, and in later years, many Targaryen princes would hold it with the title Prince of Summerhall. Yet even after joining the realm, Dorne was allowed to keep certain laws and customs of its own. For example, inheritance would always pass to the eldest child, whether son or daughter. And as Daeron began bringing more and more Dornishmen to the Red Keep, some even taking seats on the small council, many in the realm felt the king had grown too favorable to Dorne. This resentment would become one of the roots of the Blackfyre Rebellion. In the years that followed, Daemon Blackfyre began to reveal the nature of a traitor. One source of bitterness was the very marriage he had been forced into. Daemon had married Rohan of Tyrosh because Aegon had demanded it, not because Daemon desired it. Instead, Daemon became enamored of Daeron's sister, Princess Daenerys. She was only 2 years younger than Daemon, and, if the singers are to be believed, Daenerys cared for Daemon as well. But neither Aegon IV nor Daeron II wished such a match to occur. Another tale claims Daemon did not object to marrying Rohan at all, yet he wanted, like Aegon the Conqueror and Maegor the Cruel, to have more than one wife. Aegon IV may have promised him that. Daeron II did not. Daeron refused Daemon's wish and ended the matter by marrying Daenerys to Meryn Martell as part of the agreement that brought Dorne into the realm. Perhaps Daenerys truly loved Daemon. No one can know. What we do know is that in the years that followed, Daenerys became a loyal wife to Prince Meryn, and if she had ever loved Daemon Blackfyre, it belonged to the past. Daeron's reign strengthened the realm, and both nobles and small folk alike came to call him Daeron the Good. He ruled with fairness and a gentle heart. Some even believed his Dornish queen helped shape that mercy. Daeron was not a great warrior. Descriptions paint him as small-boned, thin-armed, and slightly stooped, more a scholar than a fighter. Yet 2 of his 4 sons became formidable knights. His eldest son, Prince Baelor, later known as Baelor Breakspear, earned his name at 17 after a famous victory in the tourney celebrating Daenerys' wedding, defeating Daemon Blackfyre in the final match. And his youngest son, Prince Maekar, grew into a hard and powerful warrior. Prince Baelor carried his mother's Dornish blood. His hair and eyes were black. He looked more Martell than Targaryen, yet he was admired for the same fairness and generosity as his father. But the knights and lords of the Dornish marches, men who had fought the Dornish for generations, did not trust Daeron nor Prince Baelor. To them, the Dornish were still enemies, and so they began to look instead to Daemon Blackfyre. Tall, strong, almost a demigod wearing a man's shape, bearing the sword of Aegon the Conqueror, everything Daeron was not. The seeds of rebellion had been planted. It would take years for them to bear fruit. Daeron did not insult Daemon, nor treat him unjustly, yet Daemon still turned against him. If it began with Daemon's love for Daenerys, why did the rebellion not begin until 8 years later? 8 years is a long time, especially when Rohan had borne Daemon 7 children, and Daenerys had already given Prince Meryn an heir. The truth was that these seeds had been planted by Aegon the Unworthy. Aegon IV despised the Dornish and constantly dreamed of war with them. Many lords longed for the old days of bloodshed in Dorne. They were dissatisfied with Daeron the Peacemaker, so they threw their support behind Daemon Blackfyre. But what truly pushed Daemon toward the Iron Throne? Perhaps it was another bastard, Sir Aegor Rivers, called Bittersteel, hot-blooded, carrying the pride and fury of House Bracken. Aegor constantly urged Daemon toward rebellion. Perhaps he was easily offended, perhaps he carried grudges from the times Aegon IV had expelled him and House Bracken from the Red Keep, twice. Or perhaps it was fueled by Aegor's bitter rivalry with Brynden Rivers. Whatever the real reason, Aegor called on Daemon to seize the throne. And Daemon agreed, going so far as to betroth his eldest daughter Calla to Aegor. Bittersteel's sword was bitter, but his tongue was sharper still. For years he whispered into Daemon's ear, into the ears of knights and lords as well. In time, those whispers took root. Daemon Blackfyre decided he would take the Iron Throne. News quickly reached King Daeron that Daemon had proclaimed himself king. No one knows how Daeron learned so swiftly, but it is very likely Brynden Rivers was the one who informed him. More on Brynden will come later. Daeron immediately commanded the Kingsguard to arrest Daemon before his plans could go any further. But Daemon was warned in time, helped by the famed hot-headed knight Sir Quentyn Ball, Fireball, and escaped the Red Keep safely. Daemon's allies seized upon this as their cause for war, claiming Daeron had acted against Daemon out of baseless fear. Some went further still, branding the king Daeron the Falseborn, implying he was not truly Aegon IV's son. And so, in 196 AC, the Blackfyre Rebellion finally erupted, an uprising that would endure through 5 generations of House Blackfyre and prove one of the most stubborn conflicts in Targaryen history. Daemon Blackfyre's Black Dragon banner was raised, and with it came countless battles across the 7 kingdoms, great and small alike. And here we will close this part. It seemed that after Dorne joined the 7 kingdoms, peace might last, but joy is often short-lived. The The consequences of Aegon IV's 12 years of filth and ruin finally exploded, igniting the longest and most persistent rebellion of the Targaryen era, the Blackfyre Rebellion. The full story of all 5 rebellions will come in the next installment of this series, the Blackfyre Rebellions. This episode focused more on Targaryen internal politics than on battles, so it may have felt slower, but I truly hope you'll continue to support the next parts.